Welcome to Behind the Badge with your hosts,
Lieutenant Ryan Williams,
and Officer Cammie Vandermolen.
your source for all things Pawnee Police.
Today on a Friday, Behind the Badge, your weekly visit with the Fond du Lac Police Department, recruitment and retention specialist.
You got it that time.
I finally got it that time. I just have to say it very slowly.
Yeah, you have to take your time on the enunciation.
Enunciation,
Yes.
yes. I was actually practicing it before you came in here. Specialist, I had to add that there. I didn't
Yes,
say it. You're not
yes.
just recruitment and retention. You're recruitment and retention specialist. Wow, I had to say it 3 times in less than 30 seconds.
You can make that into quite the tongue twister. Like,
Yeah,
is it Peter picked a, what is,
Peter Piper picked
picked
a
a peck of pickled peppers, right?
Oh,
Yes.
geez.
That'd be something you could make that into some sort of tongue twister.
There is. I actually used to MC weddings, and I know that sounds a little bit weird. So I worked with a DJ company, and it was a 2-person team. So there was Tyler, who played the music,
Sure.
but then that allowed him to always be behind the decks, if you will. And then I was out in front of the crowd doing all of the announcing pieces. It's really nice, right? Because otherwise,
Yeah.
it's a one-person show.
Yes.
If you're introducing one of the specialty dances, father-daughter, mother-son, first dance, etc., the DJ's got to be behind the booth, right?
Sure.
So it's nice to have.
Queuing that up,
Nice to
yeah.
have Mr. MC. Plus, I have these really sparkly gold shoes and a gold bow tie. So
I can just see it.
that's really cool. But the company that I worked for, the gentleman who ran it, he always would have us go through like a training camp, and there were tongue twister exercises he would recommend we do before any time that
Sure.
I had to perform or get out there. And it wasn't doing Peter Piper and all of that, but it was
Red leather, yellow leather, things
Yes,
like yes.
that
So
was one of
theater
them.
kid here.
Okay, so that's, and that obviously I was not a theater
Unique
person.
New York.
Okay, then he got those from theater, because those
Yes,
were 2 of the
absolutely.
ones that we did.
Yes, yeah, it's a great way to sort of, get that, all those muscles and
Yeah.
your tongue moving and everything you need to
Yeah.
make sure you're speaking clearly.
I know, I don't do it enough with this job. I'll do it sometimes. Depends how much fun I've had the night before and how many comments I have at 5 in the morning. But no, fun stuff to talk about there.
Yeah.
So there we go. And Ryan, of course, we're on the air now. He's back now from the trip.
Yes.
And so I'm sure if he's on the show next week, we'll find all about get to hear all about the Unity bike ride.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's going to be fun to hear about. I mean, I know you guys talked about him going out there leading up to it, but it'll be nice to hear about all of his adventures. And there is something that special, I think we'll save it for when we talk to him, but a special task that I had given him while he was out there.
He gave us a teaser.
Oh, he
about
did,
that.
did he?
Talked about the duck.
Yes!
He talked about the duck.
Yes, I've been getting some funny videos.
So has he
Yes.
been? He's been sending.
Yes, he did a good job. Yes, he
Has
had
he?
sent them while he was out there. Yeah, and I had gotten some cute videos. So I'm anxious to see how that turns out.
Fun. That's great. So today's topic is responding to noise complaints.
Yeah, we're going to continue with this sort of series, I call it, that
Yeah.
we've been talking about as far as what all goes into some of our response and certain types of calls. And especially in the summer, we seem to see a lot more noise complaints. I think, again, because people are outdoors, people have windows open, that type of thing. And so I thought, let's just talk about kind of our response to those and what we look for and what we do. But it's interesting. Noise complaints are kind of one of those, I think Ryan has talked about it before, that gray area.
Sure.
There's a lot of sort of subjectiveness to it, I guess, especially in Fond du Lac. We don't necessarily have like quiet hours. So I thought we would talk about that.
Yeah, so break it down.
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to respond. And usually we are responding to a noise complaint non-emergency. That would not be something that we would put our lights and sirens on for. And sometimes people get frustrated at the time it takes us to get to a noise complaint, to actually respond. And that's dependent on, how many officers we have available, what type of priority calls they're on. And I understand that these types of calls, we kind of call them quality of life type of calls. They can be annoying, they can be frustrating, we get it.
Right.
But many times we are dealing with sort of on that, when you look at that scale of priority and what we have to prioritize, we're looking at some things that are, maybe have an element of public safety, and those always are going to come first. So you may be waiting a while for an officer, but we'll get around to it when we can. Unfortunately, sometimes those things that you're calling about are no longer going on when we get there.
Right. I could see where, that timeliness where they might be upset.
Yeah.
It's either one, they want the noise to end now, or two, you got here and the noise ended 30 minutes ago.
Yes, or it ended just before we arrived, or
Right.
whatever it may be, right? So we do have an ordinance in Fond du Lac against unnecessary noise. So it's basically, I printed off the ordinance, so I'm just going to read it, so
Sure.
make sure I got it right here. It's prohibited, no person shall cause any unreasonably loud, disturbing, or unnecessary noise, or any noise of such character, intensity, or duration as to be detrimental to life or health of an individual, or which is in the disturbance of public peace and welfare. So that's it. There's a lot of stuff going on in
Yeah.
there, right? But you have to look at, okay, so we're going to be unreasonably. Well, what's the definition of unreasonably? So you have to kind of look at all of those things. So this is one of those calls where there's a lot of discretion involved, especially because we don't have hours of quiet in the city. There isn't from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. There's going to be no, there isn't that. So it's sort of up to everybody, I guess, to kind of be considerate and a good neighbor. It's what I always tell people, be considerate, be a good neighbor. But you also have to realize that in the city, you are going to have a certain amount of noise. It just is part of living in the city, people living their lives, right? A lot of people think, well, I can make as much noise as I want during the day. But we have people who shift work, so that might not be the case. However, if I'm an officer responding to a noise complaint Monday through Friday during the day, I am going to take into consideration that the majority of people who work Monday through Friday are up and awake, and so that tolerance for where that noise is going to be different than, let's say, on a work week night.
Right.
After 11 p.m. When everybody or most everybody is asleep. So you have to kind of look at all of those things when you're making sort of a determination of, I guess, what's unnecessary. Some of the things we look at when we arrive is can you clearly hear it at a certain distance? But that, again, there isn't a set amount of distance, but if I'm half a block away and I can clearly hear it, it may be too loud. But again, then we also look at, what is this area zoned as? Is it residential? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? And if it's industrial or commercial, they may be acting within, what is expected of that business. We have people who live above, bars.
Right.
And majority of them understand that living above that comes with, again, a certain set, of sort of that, you're going to hear a lot, right? Expectations of the noise level. It may be different than if I'm living, on the outskirts of town, away from all of that stuff, and shouldn't be hearing that. And then you have different events going on that, Walleye Weekend is loud, or 4th of July celebrations. So there is sort of a give and take, if you will.
County fair.
Yep, 100%. Yep. So we have to look at, again, the time of day, the duration, maybe how far away you are when you hear it, as far as how loud it is. And again, we also respond a lot of times to apartment buildings, and you do hear a loud, maybe somebody's complaining about their neighbor's television being too loud, but then you go into the neighbor's apartment and it's actually at a normal level. It's just they have really thin walls, but
I've lived in some apartments like that.
Right, exactly.
Don't miss those days.
It doesn't necessarily mean that person is doing anything wrong. They're just living their life, and it's it comes kind of, unfortunately, with some of those multifamily units as well. You can have some issues like that, or we also get a lot of dog barking complaints. So I was going to say, some of the noise complaints, we get loud music, right? Loud parties, right? Yelling and screaming, barking dogs. We get that a lot, right? Again, dogs bark.
They
right?
do, I know.
But it's a matter, again, of the duration. So do they bark and then somebody comes and gets them and brings them inside, or do they let them sit out there for an hour barking, nonstop? So it kind of just depends on the situation. We have to do a lot of, we'll talk to some of the other neighbors. Let's say you have you call in. We will actually talk to some of the other, do you hear it? How often do you hear it? That kind of thing. So once we determine that there may be an issue that we need to address, we will make contact with that individual. We'll generally talk to them. Sometimes they're not even aware how loud, how that noise travels. Exactly. And most of the time people are considerate. And they're like, oh, I'll turn that down, or I'll bring the dog in, or I'll do better with that warning, right? And if they don't, we come back and then we can issue citations, right? But some of the things that we leave, I guess, with complainants as far as advice on how to deal with them is, document it. Because many times you show up and it's just like, well, I hear it all the time. But we really need those specifics.
What's that mean? Right?
Yeah, what does that mean? What's all the time? So duration, right? Time of day, how long? And if you can, everybody has those wonderful little things in their hand, right? Those phones that we all live by, those tiny little computers now. And most of them have that ability to make those videos, right? Those, at least an audio recording. Maybe you can't see the dog, but maybe you can just, record it, or the loud music, or whatever the problem is, right? So we always say document as much as you can, because one of the things that we have to show, again, is it isn't just, we generally like to give people a chance to change that behavior before we just go and issue them a fine, right? But if we come back again, we would like that documentation, or they'll say, well, this is just this one time. I've never had them out there before. But if I've already talked to the complainant, and the complainant has shown me 10, videos of the last 10 mornings in a row where the dog's been barking for 2 hours and nobody has let it in, then we have something to actually work with, right? So I always tell people, document those issues and journal those times or dates or whatever it is in the behavior. Anything that you've done, maybe you've even gone over there and asked them to turn it down. Some people are still willing to kind of take that first step before calling us,
right,
if they feel comfortable or safe doing that. So those are some of the things that we kind of look into consideration and look at. Every situation, again, is unique and different, and there has to be that give and take, I think, in the city, especially during those waking hours for most people. You have loud construction, but again, is it at the end of the workday? Is it done, or is it going into the 2 o'clock in the morning? They're still banging and on things and that kind of thing. So we have to look at all of those things before we take any kind of action.
Lot to look at.
It is a lot. It's a simple. It's a fairly, on the level of calls that we go to.
Right.
It's kind of down at the bottom. Again, it's very important. I understand that, because I have had issues with nuisance noises, in places that I've lived. And I understand how frustrating that can be, especially if you do work like shift work, or you have a baby who's napping or something like that. It can be frustrating. I understand that. But in sort of that, again, that priority of calls, and when you have that public safety stuff come first, it can kind of get pushed down to the bottom, and it's sort of what we would call more, I guess, less of a priority.
Right.
Not important, but just as far as our response. But when you start thinking about it, there's a lot that really goes into it. And it is sort of one of those, again, living in the gray areas where we all have to kind of get along and put up with each other to a certain extent and be considerate. So I would just end this with, please be considerate, be a good neighbor. It's not, you are living amongst people, and we just all want to try and do the best we can.
Be a good neighbor indeed. It's
That's
behind
right.
the badge. KFIZ today.
Morning talk, city's hot. A new day, let's all start. Behind the badge, we'll stand tall through the ups and the fall. From the light, hear the call. Behind the badge, we're all